23 years ago today, Islamic terrorists attacked the United States on 9/11 in the biggest terrorist attack in history that brought down the Twin Towers in the World Trade Center, that attacked the Pentagon, and another plane that was brought down in Pennsylvania. And what was clear that day was that this is a moment that changes the world, changes history. What wasn't clear is in which direction it will change history and change the course of history. And I think today, 23 years later, and in the first anniversary of 9/11 since the October 7th terrorist attack in Israel, we can say that the terrorists have succeeded. They have succeeded in their mission to turn the West against itself. They have succeeded in their mission of showing that they will fight for their principles, their absolutely atrocious principles, and they can do so using the West's current, uh, let's say, current dominant morality against itself. They can use it against the West, and the West will turn on itself. Um, Looking back, we can see indications of that immediately after 9/11, when George W. Bush spoke, I believe it was 9 days later in Congress, and said that Islam is a religion of peace, a lie, a bold-faced lie, telling that lie to the people who had just been attacked in the name of Islam. From that to the Saudis being the first people to arrive in the U.S. To talk to Bush after 9/11, to Tony Blair, the then British Prime Minister, trying to be a moderating force in the response. As America's closest ally, instead of being an ally and saying let's get those fuckers, let's destroy them, let's make sure they can never do this again. The policy was a policy of appeasement. When war was finally declared, the first enemy, first country that was targeted was Afghanistan, where bin Laden was hiding. But the easiest target, both militarily and diplomatically, which I think was most important to Bush, the easiest target to get a coalition around. 20 years later, the Taliban, which was back in control. So even that failed. And the first thing that was dropped on Afghanistan in October, when the U.S. launched the operation, was food and medicine. It was aid. It was a way of saying to the enemy, we are not fighting against you. We're just fighting against the people who happen to be your leaders, who you haven't removed, and we will remove and supposedly be on your side on this. Anyway, welcome to the Daily Objective. We are going to discuss today that journey that the West has taken since 9/11, and some of what led up to it before 9/11, where we are today. Is there any hope? James.
Yeah, the way America started approaching Afghanistan, where Al Qaeda was and bin Laden were hiding up, sounds very familiar today, doesn't it, in the wake of October 7th? First thing you got to do is feed the enemy. First thing you got to do is fail to recognize the scope of the problem and its ideological source and its cultural source. First thing you have to do when you're George Bush is dissociate this from Islam, even though these were religiously motivated suicide bombings that killed 2,993 innocent civilians, men, women, children of all races and religions were killed that day. And that was just that day. The health consequences in lower Manhattan have been significant, and many people, and not to mention the firefighters and first responders who were there on 9/11 at the World Trade Center when it crumbled to the ground. Um, they've been suffering health problems ever since. And when you count the number of deaths connected with it, it's well over 3,000, into the many thousands. But over 2,990 people died that day. Now, you're right, it didn't emerge from nowhere. It emerged from a context of appeasing Islamic terrorism that America had already well established and committed itself to. We've spoken about how in 1983, Iranian-backed terrorists attacked a Marine base in Beirut and slaughtered Americans. We can go through, the list is so grim. In 1985, Iranian-sponsored bombing in Paris killed 13. In 1983, that is to say, years before 9/11, there was a World Trade Center bombing by Islamic terrorists that failed to bring down the World Trade Center in 1993, but killed people. And what did we do? Nothing. The USS Cole was attacked, bombed, killing US servicemen. We didn't do anything about it. 2001, almost 3,000 people die. In 2003, there was a bombing in Riyadh aimed at Westerners by Islamic terrorists that killed 27. Just hit some highlights. In 2004, there was the infamous Madrid train bombing that killed 193. In 2005, the London Underground was hit by suicide bombers, killing 52. In 2012, Toulouse and Montauban in France, there was a shooting by Islamists that killed 7. In 2013, there was the Boston Marathon bombing. In 2014, Charlie Hebdo. In 2016, the Nice bombing. And at a certain point, it gets so grim that you stop counting the number of bodies before 9/11 and after 9/11, indicating why we got into that problem in the first place by appeasing the Islamic monsters who would be willing, for religious reasons, to kill themselves in the effort to bring down Western civilization, whether it's in Amsterdam or Paris or London or New York or Washington, D.C., or frankly, today in Israel. It is the same enemy we're fighting, the same ideology we're fighting. Our appeasement of Iran astonishes me. They're the world's they have for decades been the world's #1 sponsor of terrorism. And we have done nothing but appease them. Small exceptions here and there, little, but to appease Iran, which is on the verge of getting a nuclear bomb. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a policy of sickening appeasement which caused the death of almost 3,000 people on 9/11. And consider how much more sickening that appeasement was between 9/11 and October 7th of last year. All of that appeasement is blood on the hands of every Western leader. They are failed to defend civilization. They've failed to defend the population of Western countries. We keep getting killed throats get cut in Amsterdam and Paris. Thousands can die on 9/11, and we can still appease these Islamic monsters to the point that they can perpetrate October 7th. Well, they've been encouraged, they've been rewarded, and nothing has been done. We can't even name ideologically the enemy here. So should we be surprised when more innocent people are raped, killed, mutilated on October 7th? And now consider in the wake of October 7th, the feeble, spineless response from the West. Even Israel, the feeble, spineless response that can only, and ladies and gentlemen, you don't have to have magical powers of prescience or prophecy. The appeasement that caused 9/11, the appeasement in the wake of 9/11 that helped cause October 7th continues. And so I can predict to you, I have no crystal ball. I do not know where it will happen next, when it will happen next, but the West has, across the board, failed to address this problem in any significant way that will discourage more of these religiously motivated, mystically motivated, racist motivated attacks on the West. It is disgusting. It is repulsive. My wife knew people who died on 9/11. That was more than 20 years ago. And now I'm hearing from people who knew people on October 7th. Ladies and gentlemen, when? What will it take? How many children have to be killed? Innocent children have to be killed before we treat this like a war. I know we keep saying on this channel, we've got to treat it like World War II, like we're fighting the Nazis. And we don't. When? How many? How many innocent civilians have to be slaughtered, killed? How many children have to die? How many women have to be raped before we take this seriously and realize that we're at war? Way back in 1979, when the Islamic Republic took over in Iran and they engaged in an act of war, seizing an embassy. That was an act of war, and we should have treated it as a war then and brought down those evil monsters. No, but over 40 years, we have not done so. We have put our head in the sand and pretended that this is not a real war and that we're not at war as we were with the Nazis. Until and unless that happens, ladies and gentlemen, these bloody slaughters of innocent children and civilians will still occur, and they will keep occurring until we address the problem ideologically and militarily in a full-throated way and militarily in a devastating, overwhelming way that ignores all of these pleas for, oh, hold back, feed them first. No, it is the Muslim population itself that it accepts this evil ideology. And we have to realize that it is the ideology dominant in the Middle East today that the civilized world is at war with, and a real war like we were facing with the Nazis. I know I'm
Thank you.
emotional, but
Bonnie, thank you for the super chat. Jeff, thank you for the 9 Canadian dollars and 11 cents. Jeff says, never forget 9/11. Yes, never forget and begin to understand, hopefully, as Jim mentioned, the motives and then fight back against it because there's more to it than unfortunately the never forget slogan, and I don't think this is the case with Jeff, but it's the case with many who use it, is not used as also a reason to figure out what's going on now to make sure it never happens again. And I think that should be that is certainly part of what we're trying to do here. Thank you, Bull Moose, for the super chat. He says he can't send it in the chat, so he sends it in an email, which Daniel then sends to me. Okay, I will read this. Maybe if we cremated or buried dead terrorists with pig oil, it'll make them believe that they might not go to heaven, and maybe they'll think twice. Maybe I would just, I'm, while they're still alive, because what happens when they're dead, they don't actually get to experience. While they're still alive, maybe let them eat bacon. But anyway, yeah, there's a comment here by Jesse, a couple comments. Jesse says, Bush Jr. started this trend. I still can't believe he was president. And then Jesse says, if he didn't go into Iraq, that region might still be stable under Saddam control. So first of all, no, Bush Jr. didn't start this trend. He maybe perfected it, but it was started before. Remember, Clinton, yeah, first of all, yeah, 1979, the U.S. Embassy was taken, and the hostages were taken in the embassy by the Islamists in Iran who had just taken over, and the U.S. appeasement then is told terrorists that they could get away with it. So that was a message that was heard loud and clear. And Reagan then ran away from Lebanon after the attack on the Marines there, and Bush, I'm sure there's more that he did than I remember Bush Sr., but he certainly, his response to the Intifada was to force Israel to negotiate with terrorists in Madrid. And Clinton, of course, forced Israel to negotiate more. He also, besides the fact that he could have acted against Iran, he also could have taken out bin Laden, which he has said, he could have taken out bin Laden, but he was surrounded and like 200 civilians would have died. So, yeah, Clinton didn't know that the result would be 3,000 dead Americans, but he knew what bin Laden was, and he chose not to take him out. So it's certainly not Bush Jr. who started it, but Bush Jr. was faced with the biggest challenge and failed it spectacularly, very well in accordance with this trend. And James, I know you have something to say, but is it quick? Because I want to comment on the next.
This began long before. This began with our appeasement, by the way, of dictators around the world even before this. But don't forget the Munich atrocities at the Olympics in the 70s. Don't forget all the killings that happened in Israel in the 80s and 90s that we were ignoring. In France in the 80s, we were ignoring terrorism again and again and again. It was Carter, it was Reagan, it was Bush Senior, Clinton, Bush, yeah, Bush W. He just perfected it. He actually had the temerity to go to a mosque within days and say it has nothing to do with your beautiful religion of peace. Trust me, rather than saying you all got a problem and you guys better fix it within your community. You're the problem. This religion. Look at the suicide nature of these bombings. In any case, Razi, yeah, this has been coming because of our ideology for a long, long time. And now you consider all of the terrorism since 9/11, it's become inexcusable. We now know that our appeasement is just slaughtering people in suicide bombings, throat cuttings, shootings, you name it.
Yeah, and so just to answer Jesse's second point, so the second point was if he didn't go into Iraq, that region might still be stable under Saddam control. I mean, look, first of all, after he went into Afghanistan, which was the easiest to get a coalition around diplomatically, he kind of sensed, I guess, this is psychologizing, but for whatever reason, it was clear that Afghanistan was not enough, so he went to the next easiest country to get a coalition around. Now, the right thing to do was to go after Iran and Saudi Arabia, from where most of the terrorists came, including and the mastermind of it came. But Saudi Arabia is an ally, and Iran is too strong and has friends in the West,
Oh no,
so
we
that was not
invite
an
the
option. So he
we
chose Iraq, but Saddam is a stabilizing force. Saddam had, went to war with Iran, which of course, it's good when bad guys fight each other, but still, he occupied Kuwait. He was not a stable. He shot rockets at Israel, which didn't do that much damage, but did kill some people. And Israel, of course, didn't respond to that as well, which was another sign of appeasement.
Saddam Hussein would
And
attack.
he supported terrorists, including Palestinian terrorists who would get money from the Iraqi regime. So no, Saddam was not a stabilizing force. There is no stabilizing force in the Middle East, except maybe
No,
Israel to some extent. But
that's the point.
yeah,
That's the point. In failing to name the general enemy here. But I'll grant you this much, sir, that in taking out Saddam without dealing with Iran, by dealing only with Iraq and not Iran, it created an inevitable power vacuum that the Islamic Republic of Iran was perfectly happy to fill in. So it definitely empowered Iran to focus just on Saddam Hussein. But wait a minute, we didn't even do Afghanistan properly. It was a proxy war. At Tora Bora, we let bin Laden escape with most of his crew. So while we did a half-assed war, even when we were attempting to go after Al Qaeda, and as Razi points out, it's really diplomatic reasons why we went after Iraq. We ignored the actual people. I mean, look, Iraq is a mess of different ethnicities and the different flavors of Islam. The people of Iran actually would have supported, at least a good portion of them, the overthrow of their evil government. So rather than helping them, rather than getting to the nation that is the number one sponsor of all this terrorism that I've been talking about, we ignored and appeased Iran. We did a half-assed war in Afghanistan. But if you want my honest opinion, sir, we should have taken out. Again, the first people we spoke to in a friendly way were Saudi Arabia. We should have immediately cut off diplomatic relations with them, called for an investigation into Saudi Arabia's role in this. We should have, frankly, taken out the governments of Iran, Iraq, Syria, and any other government in that region we didn't see. In the wake of almost 3,000 people getting slaughtered, we should have treated it like Pearl Harbor. We should say, you all want a world war? Let's start with Iran, and we will go from there until we get a new Middle East. That is the way we have to fight this. It is Islam and I don't care what flavor of Islam it is. And if you just go after Saddam Hussein and you leave Iran intact, guess what's going to happen? What just happened? And you know, Leonard Peikoff was so prescient on this point. It's remarkable. If we had heeded his advice 23 years ago in addressing the issue of the Islamic Republic of Iran, October 7th would not have happened. The blood dripping off the hands of Western leaders is repulsive to me. Their continued appeasement necessitates the death of more innocent civilians, and it is not ending. Even after the atrocities of October 7th, notice the same appeasement and the same appeasing attitudes.
Thank you, Catherine, for the super chat. Susie says 78% of Muslims in the UK thought the Danish cartoonist should be prosecuted. Other polls show that majority of Muslims think homosexuality should be illegal. That many support Sharia law. We've spoken on this channel in the past couple of months since the UK election about the fact that not only were 5 people in this country voted in to parliament on a basically pro-Hamas ticket. That was what their campaign was about. But many others did quite well. Because of the first past the post system, you either win your constituency or you're not in parliament. But we're closer than you'd like such people to be. And we saw that in communities where in an election that Labour won by a landslide, in communities with a large Muslim population, Labour did worse than they did in the past, and this was the issue over which they did worse. So that's something to remember. And look, it's not that different. There might be a little bit of a difference between different countries in the West, but it's not that different. I mean, in many countries, the Muslim population is not pro-West. They don't want Western civilization. They maybe enjoy some of the outcomes of it, but this is not what they want, and they will fight for the opposite, which is something Western people should think about, and they don't for the most part. So in preparation for the reality show, which follows this show, which is a recap of last night's debate, I watched, other than watching the debate itself, I also watched Jon Stewart, his commentary on The Daily Show about the debate. And he brought up that Dick Cheney endorsed Kamala Harris. And, he went on a whole rant about Dick Cheney that I've never seen Jon Stewart go on when he talks about terrorists. But one of the things he said was because of Dick Cheney, we came this close to the whole world being destroyed. And he made a point of who even listens to Dick Cheney's endorsement. Is it people who think, okay, Kamala is good on some issues, but she's not going to bomb the Middle East enough? So Jon Stewart, who is in New York, right, was on New York presumably on 9/11, or was living there at least. It's so quick that people forget what happened and what was the reason for military action by the U.S., which again was insufficient. But no, the people who want to destroy the world are the Islamists that you're defending, Jon Stewart, and they want to destroy you too. They want to kill you. First of all, because you're a Jew, but also because you are you're of the West. You're a symbol of the West in so many ways. And so this is really something we should look at culturally, the way we look at things. And by the way, the Jon Stewart approach in the U.S. 23 years after 9/11 is already widespread in Israel less than a year after October 7th. So many people have forgotten what happened that day, or at least forgotten, the one part they remember is that hostages were taken and some are still held. They forget that the Islamists did what they did and don't realize that the way to make sure it never happens again is to defeat them, is to eliminate the enemy. And if we don't realize that, the enemy will eliminate us.
It's not the potency of these savages. It really isn't. America and Israel obviously are overwhelmingly stronger when it comes to military technologies, tactics, strategy, equipment, what they could do. No, it's the moral weakness of the West It is our failure to have moral clarity and to understand what's going on. But I don't mean to depress everyone, but the fact is, given the attitudes in London and Washington, D.C., and frankly, Jerusalem, how long, how long does Israel have? How long does Western civilization have? We are willing to put up with murder after murder after murder from these savages, fail to name the ideological source, fail to militarily take them on in any serious way. And so all I can say is, ladies and gentlemen, how long does Western civilization have? How long does Israel have? How long does Europe have? How long does America have? It's just a slow drip, drip, drip of attrition where we failed to do anything about it. And in the whole process, what we see is the death of civilization. As you know, on October 7th, mothers were forced to watch their children die. Women were brutally raped. They mutilated dead bodies as they boastfully videotaped themselves doing this. These people are death worshippers. It is a death cult, as we've pointed out. Until we can name the serious problem at hand here, these people will have no problems killing themselves, slaughtering their own children, so that they can bring down civilization itself. That's what's at stake here, ladies and gentlemen. If the West continues with these attitudes, it's only a matter of time before it's the end of both Israel and, frankly, in the long run, civilization as such.
Yeah, and the West will continue with these attitudes, which is it's pretty much guaranteed, as and was guaranteed in yesterday's debate, which, as I mentioned, will be the topic of the reality show in a few minutes. I just want to. There's a point here by Kirsten that I want to read out. She says, "If the roles were reversed, do you think they would clothe and feed you?" I mean, the roles are reversed, and that we're at war with them, they're at war with us. Why is it that that the side being attacked should feed the attacker and not vice versa? And also, why is it specifically, there are no demands of the international community that Israel start feeding, Mozambique or I don't know, any other place in the world. It's specifically the people who attacked Israel. Now, yes, Israel is fighting back, so that is supposedly what Israel is doing wrong. But it is that is, there's no better. There are many really unfortunate examples we see of altruism in action around us, from the welfare state to environmentalism to many, many others. Nothing is as clear. It is really altruism on steroids. The idea that if somebody is dedicating their life to nothing but killing you, by exterminating a whole nation, which is the goal of Hamas, to exterminate the Jews. Uh, because of that, because they are taking that action, the Jews need to feed them and give them the fuel that they need in order to keep this war going. It is unbelievably upside down logic and upside down morality, and it is prevalent, unfortunately, in the world.
Well, when moral perversity becomes the moral ideal, when moral betrayal of all that is valuable, when the betrayal of human life becomes a moral ideal, we're screwed. That's it. Because ethics, ideas, ladies and gentlemen, is what shapes history. It shapes politics. It shapes an individual human being's soul. No, when we're so morally upside down, ladies and gentlemen, that's the problem.
Yeah.
That and the minute we get moral clarity, a little mental and moral clarity here, these savages would be easy to deal with, frankly, easier than the Nazis. But we got to treat it like the Nazis. Until and unless we do, I cannot be hopeful about the future of civilization as such.
Yeah, and we scheduled today's episode of the reality show in advance, knowing that it'll be a debate recap. We called it debate recap, thinking we will change the title once we see the debate and know a bit more. And I think you just came up with the perfect title for that debate. We're screwed. Thanks, James. Thanks everybody for watching. The reality show starts in a couple of minutes. We will be talking about last night's debate. Make sure you join us, and we'll see you there.
Be well.